It is time now for Money Power Politics. Tomorrow could be a big day for the fate of Trump's tariffs. The Supreme Court will release its first opinions of this year. Those could include a ruling on the legality of the tariffs. Major companies are already lining up for potentially massive refunds. More than 1,000 businesses are in a legal fight to claw back import taxes they have already paid. And any ruling against the president could trigger a huge battle over who gets what and how. Here to discuss, Justin Wolford, professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan, and Rohit Chopra, former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Okay, Justin, let's talk about these tariffs. I've been saying all along, if the Supreme Court rules them illegal, it could be Trump's most graceful exit, because it would help the markets, it would help the economy, and he could say, I tried. What do you think is going to happen?
I'm right there with you, mate. Not only are these guys crossed, so are my toes as well. Look, the tariffs, the way they implemented them, to me at least, I'm an economist, not a lawyer, look illegal on their face. There's no national emergency in the United States, and that's what Trump has put. That's the legal ruling that Trump's relying on. And it's not that this is going to get rid of all tariffs, though, Stephanie. This is going to get rid of specific country tariffs. There's a second set of tariffs out there which are based on specific goods that are constant across countries. So this would wipe out about 2/3 of the current tariff regime. Trump has threatened that he'd bring a lot of it back, and there are lots of ways in which he could, but none that are quite as effective as the authority he made up and gave himself.
So let's say they do rule them illegal. What happens? How does the money get? How does it get sent? Where does it get sent?
Yeah, they don't know. And here's what really bothers me. Every time there is something that is illegal and people are hurt, those who are hurt really don't get compensation. What about all the small businesses? They're not the importer of record that is going to get the refund. What about all the families who paid so much more for strollers, back to school supplies? And there's just no consequences for it. So we need a totally new approach to make sure there is a system where you can break the law over and over and over again, and there's just no consequences. And the people who get hurt the most, they need to get something and not nothing, which is what I expect will happen.
All right, Justin, new topic. The president is feeling the pressure that he has to do something to address the affordability crisis, or just any sort of policy that his voters are asking for, because they're not asking for Greenland or Venezuela. And tonight, there's news out that he's ordering his representatives to buy $200 billion worth of mortgage bonds, and he claims this will drive down mortgage rates and make housing more affordable. What do you think?
I'm not particularly convinced by this. I think the most important organisation in terms of setting interest rates out there is the central bank. It's the Fed. So if you all of a sudden make housing a whole lot more, if you make those interest rates lower, you're going to see through that way, the Fed can offset it by lowering rates slowly or raising them a little bit to offset. So, look, there's a little possibility that something happens there, but we're going to be talking about something in the hundredths of the percentage point rather than anything particularly meaningful.
All right, I want to talk about this idea we heard yesterday from actually, I should stop myself. A year ago, we heard it from Democrats who floated the idea that we should ban institutional investors from buying large swaths of single-family homes because it was driving up the price of homes. We saw this from Democrats a year ago. Republicans said absolutely not, no way. Then Trump floated it yesterday, and Scott Bessent spoke about it earlier, and we have a soundbite from that. Watch this.
Institutional investors have a tax advantage when they buy single-family homes. They buy somewhere between 2-5% of the houses every year, more in select markets, push the prices up, and we're not going to make them divest, but we're going to put an end to the buying.
If you voice-tuned a Brooklyn accent to that, I think I was listening to Bernie Sanders.
Or are they taking another page from the Kamala Harris campaign? This feels like something, though, is obviously not going to happen.
Why?
We've heard this story before. Trump campaigned on capping credit card interest rates. What did he do? He pardoned all the credit card companies. He's campaigned on lowering costs for all sorts of medicines. They put out announcements about it, but it hasn't necessarily happened. To me, what this is about is The Trump White House feels that the walls are closing in on them when it comes to the economy. They are desperate to change the conversation about how the economy is going well. All they keep pointing to is the stock market. But the truth is that there are two economies out there. One is for people who own a lot of assets, especially stocks and real estate. And then for 90% of people, they own a tiny share of national assets, and they are struggling and on a treadmill. And this is just another broken, false promise.
Okay, but he's also on track with some of these other proposals to also tick off Wall Street and those who are free market capitalists, Justin, because now the president is threatening to cap defense executives' salaries if they don't speed up their production. They can't do share buybacks. They can't issue dividends. Again, this is the last thing you would think you would hear out of the party of big business. What's your take?
I think actually Rohit hit things exactly perfectly. Look, Steph, there's two Donald Trumps. There's what he says. What he says is he's actually populist, centre-left, takes things out of the Bernie Sanders playbook all the time, really has snappy sound bites and sounds like he cares about the working and the middle class. What he does is straight from the Republican Country Club handbook, which is tax cuts for the rich, cutting benefits for working and middle class folks. Look, what he says, some of what he says is just glorious. I love it. I would love to go shopping tomorrow with my Doge dividend. I'm going shopping with my tariff dividend. It's fantastic. I love this new healthcare plan, which costs nothing. It doesn't exist. But it sounds like it could be terrific if 10 years later they came up with something. What he does is completely different. What he says is populist and guaranteed to sort of reel you in.
Well, you can tell people a story about what's happening on the other side of the world. You cannot BS people about money they have in their pocket and what their daily lives cost.